Video games. Ever since video games were popularized by Nintendo in the 1980s, it's difficult to imagine a world without video games, or computers for that matter. Artists and developers have been owning their skills and creativity for years, doing whatever they can to push the limits, trying to wow consumers with fun, engaging, and sometimes downright addicting games. This in order to, well, make money, obviously. But just like how we have junk food which makes billions, we also have our Michelin star restaurants aspiring to be the best of the best, serving us mouth-watering dishes in ways we didn't even think possible. We will be taking a look at the 5 absolute best video games ever created. We will discuss them in detail, compare them to other masterpieces in their category, and why these 5 games deserve the title of legendary. Number 5. Double Dragon 2 NES 1989 from Acclaim. The 5th in our list is also our oldest. Though the game might not seem like much, this game did a lot of things right. Double Dragon 2 is a 2D side-scrolling adventure game with 3D properties. Most terrains allow you to move in a Z-axis, giving you depth and allowing you to flank or be flanked. It was an action game, and what every action game needs to give the player is a sense that they are in control of the action, making controller input crucial and a huge challenge for developers. This game's action is beyond flawless, and the developers really delivered. NES games were up to a single megabyte in size, but despite that hurdle and the limitation of a 2-button directional controller pad, Double Dragon managed to cram 15 different moves into this game. No kidding, 15 different moves, some of which require some situational use, but still, most modern games don't even give you that kind of flexibility. It is also the first action game to employ stagger effects and grappling. It's insane. Conventionally, most games, even today, have the buttons correspond to a specific move. Press A to punch, press B to kick. Simple enough. But the developers of Double Dragon decided to go a completely different route, making the buttons control the direction of your attack instead. A would be to attack towards the right of the screen, B would be to attack the left. Pressing A and B simultaneously resulted in a jump, regardless of direction. To make it more clear, if your character was facing forward and you pressed A, he would punch towards the front. If you pressed B, he would do a horse kick towards the back. If, however, you would be facing towards the back of the screen, then pressing B would make him punch towards the back, and A would make him do the horse kick towards the front. Takes a little getting used to at first, but it's very intuitive. With these 2 buttons, you could punch, you could horse kick, you could jab jab punch combo. At extremely close range, you can knee him in the abdomen directly into stagger, you could jump, you could dragon kick, you could whirlwind kick, a move later adapted by Ryu and Ken in Street Fighter 2, you could tiger knee for some serious damage, you could stagger your enemy using 3 to 6 punches rapidly, 1 to 2 horse kicks, or a Muay Thai knee. If you stagger your opponent successfully, new options would be available to you. You could uppercut him into the air Mortal Kombat style, or you could hair grab him if your character was strong enough. Obviously, trying to grapple a boss doesn't work. If hair grappled successfully, you were again given more options. You could knee your opponent in the face, you could elbow drop them in the neck, you could kick him in the face, which was similar to using an uppercut but way cooler, or you could judo throw him behind you, which had the added feature of automatically switching directions. Finally, Double Dragon 2, besides stagger, had another conditional effect called rising. If your character was knocked to the ground for any reason, or you just landed from a jump, your character needed to recover from that situation by adapting a crouched position called the rising position. While rising, your character could not move directions, but it unlocked a more powerful Mortal Kombat style uppercut, a rising uppercut, which was accompanied by a very satisfying sound if it connected. Or if your timing was really good, you could use the jumping knee from this position, which was accompanied by an even more satisfying sound. That's 15 moves in total. Besides these moves, a number of weapons would be available for a short time when you disarmed a mob. Some of these weapons were melee, others you could throw, one of them you could use both ways. This is a lot of flexibility, and a boatload of action cram-packed into a tiny 144 kilobytes. The flexibility gave players so many options and styles they could choose to use. It gave you the freedom to choose how you want to engage your enemy and gives you the freedom to change things up when you start to get bored. as opposed to most games where you're trapped doing the same thing over and over again. Even now, Double Dragon 2 is fun to throw on now and again and replay in different ways. The story, unfortunately, like most all NES games at the time, is not really worth mentioning. The data available to developers was so limited back then, it was impossible to do anything memorable with. Nevertheless, the level of ingenuity and the daring approach the creators had with regard to this game's combat system on a platform sporting only 2 buttons. These artists had a vision what an action game could be, and they did a fantastic job at it. Obviously, there have been other great games in the 80s and 90s that won't make this cut, one of the most obvious being the most classic, Mario Bros. There are 49 installments of Mario Bros. At the time of making this video, and it's difficult to argue with the success of such a legacy, especially when the 8-bit soundtracks are so legendary that even today they are relived in masterful ways. But I'm going to refer to my earlier analogy using restaurants, junk food versus Michelin star. Mario Bros. Is basically excellent junk food. And there's nothing wrong with that, I love my cheeseburgers too. Mario games are generally very simplistic, they appeal to a large variety of player base, it's mostly easy enjoyment unless you're speedrunning of course. Controls are very straightforward, jump with A, fire with B, hold B to dash. They were all fully two-dimensional side-scrolling adventure games until Nintendo 64 version came along. The story was always minimal, the design was very basic, very kid-friendly, and most Mario games were actually more fun to play with friends in a group than casually on your own. This is also because before Nintendo, video games or console games weren't a consumer product yet. It was a niche market. Nintendo had a huge challenge where they wanted to popularize video games to the point where it would compete for home entertainment market, going up against VHS and everyday television. To succeed at this, Nintendo has always endeavored to be innovative but rated G, thinking outside the box while remaining inside the box. And it's difficult to create something truly amazing and exceptional when you apply that much censor to any idea. Mario Bros. Games are all great games, just not the best of the best. Super Metroid by Nintendo, 1994. Having previously said all that about Mario Bros., one time where the Mario Club's pursuance of being rated G did not do anything to hinder the greatness of a game was with Super Metroid. This is not your ordinary side-scrolling adventure game where you can only move forward. The storytellers behind Super Metroid were brilliant to say the least, from the opening screen to the last boss. Let's just take one moment to look at this opening title screen. I mean, wow! You are hooked instantly. It's dark, it's mysterious, it's fearful, it's suspenseful, it makes clever use of very limited resources to a 16-bit cartridge with camera movements and sound design. You are immersed in the story and you haven't even pressed start yet. When you're done admiring the startup screen, you are given a chilling introduction, again with clever sound design that cuts off the moment the alarming news is given. And when you enter the space station, this trend is maintained even as the 16-bit cartridge tries to hit you with a jump scare. This is storytelling on a whole new level. The game is a fully controllable 2D environment that feels more like a sandbox-style RPG. You can revisit locations, wander around endlessly as you try to solve puzzles, locate secrets, increase your armory, and of course progress the main story, centered around Samus searching for the stolen Metroid. This game really had it all. The story, the ambience, the pacing, the sound design, the graphics were great for its time. The action is intense, requiring both dexterous hands and quick thinking. You are given a variety of skills including a lovely wall jump, complex boss encounters that could be downright frustrating at times, and an emotional ending conclusion. You feel like you are there with Samus, exploring the planet Zebes, trying to figure out how she can get closer and closer to the planet's core where the Metroid is supposedly being held. Despite the fact that the game is a simple adventure game, gamers of all kinds love this game since it checked so many boxes. I would love to see a remake of this game with modern graphics and a cinematic ending. Also worth noting, Samus Aran is one of the first and very few female protagonists in early video games. At the time, they were basically non-existent, not as solo characters anyway. Streets of Rage had Blaze, Castlevania, Mortal Kombat, Street Fighter, they all had main characters that were women, but Samus was a standalone protagonist, and this years before Lara Croft. Plus, even when women did become popularized protagonists both in film and games, they were still, and often are, overly sexualized. Super Metroid didn't do this. Yes, underneath all that armor, Samus was an Amazon bombshell, but most people didn't even know Samus was a she until her armor shattered from taking too much damage. Or if a gamer happened to be so good they got to the end screen without dying once, and completing it within 3 hours time to see the secret reveal. The developers refused to sell her off cheap, and I wish more developers would do this. Villains in this game are also equally diverse, though up for some interpretation. Ripley is normally referred to as a he, and he is a bony type. The Godzilla-sized Kraid is also referred to as a him, and has a more fluffy build. Dragon is clearly a parent of sorts, whose babies mourn the loss over him/her, and Mother Brain is one scary lady. This gender equality was still forming in the early 90s, and let's face it, the issue persists to this day, sadly. But Nintendo was an example in setting the right mentality. Oh, and if you had any doubts about Dragon being a parent, look how she quite literally spanks Samus for being a naughty thief, coming into her house and stealing her space jump. Halo is the only first-person shooter, or FPS, to make this list. FPS games tend to suffer from a wide array of problems, starting with their story. Most developers choose to neglect the story in favor of investing more time into gameplay itself. As a result, the story mode tends to be very shallow. A lot of FPS games have very buggy aim mechanics with limited control. Most of all, these games suffer from poor difficulty scaling. Many of these games are often just a series of endless tunnels where all you do is shoot, making the game very monotone. Halo didn't fix all these problems, but they sure as hell fixed most. The game is incredibly immersive, launching you into a galaxy of unknowns with clear skies, huge maps, lush environments, a kick-ass story to keep you engaged, solid scripting with voice acting that sells, and both Master Chief and Cortana are total badasses. You are given a lot of flexibility in weapons, vehicles, and armors. The game is accompanied by music that changes with the mood as it happens, and sports a ton of AI, both good and bad, that really sell you the idea of being locked in a war on a galactic scale. If you had to choose one game to magically be ported to virtual reality, this would be that game. It executes FPS category perfectly. But even if you hate FPS games, you could still enjoy this game for the immersive adventure, the sci-fi experience, and the fun of piloting a Banshee or Scorpion tank. The pacing is fast, not too fast, and the developers give the gamer sufficient time to take in everything that is going on at the moment. There are more FPS masterpieces, but none can come close to the complete package that is and was Halo. To name a few, Far Cry, Overwatch, and Doom. All these games did a lot of things right. Far Cry 1 is incredibly immersive. It's the first game I've seen where you could choose to swim hours around an island, sneaking up to your mission from an alternate route, and trying to be stealthy. If you can see it, you can go there. That was how you could describe Far Cry. Set in a beautiful island chains of Micronesia, it was tempting to stop, put down your sniper rifle, and take a few moments to enjoy the view. Problem with this game was its AI and control. Flanking and stealth was pretty much irrelevant, as firing any shot, even a silenced shot, would result in all enemies immediately knowing your location and making a beeline directly for you. To make matters worse, the aim was buggy, where you would sometimes line up your sniper rifle on a stationary target, still miss, and get overwhelmed. Overwatch is a masterpiece of the MOBA genre, with extremely immersive story arcs released as Blizzard shorts. And these shorts are the best of the best. Overwatch boasts the best controls of any FPS ever. It's even more fluent than Halo's. It's incredibly fast-paced, and the avatars are polished and pixel-perfect. Overwatch has a big problem though. The immersiveness of the game and its shorts does not extend to the actual gameplay. You can't log in and experience that story. No matter how you look at it, this is an action-based FPS game that focuses heavily on competitive PvP. Every time you queue up for a match, not start a match, no, queue up and wait for a match, you are pitted against players with players. As a result, the game itself is not memorable, the match is. And the game is incredibly unrewarding for players who themselves don't excel at least above average of the game's player base. This can be frustrating beyond measure, triggers toxicity, and makes climbing in ranked feel more like a job than an actual game. Number 2. Ninja Gaiden. Ninja Gaiden did 2 things wrong. 1. The storyline. The story in 1 is god-awful, and the one-liners in NG2 are some of the worst you have ever heard.
Such is the fragility of evil.
What? What am I playing here? Hamlet the Demon Hunter?
Frailty, thy name is woman.
The only story moment worth anything is when Genji confides in Ryu, admits defeat, and dies. NG3 thankfully fixed most of this by adding story with at least some meaning and decent voice acting to sell it. Problem 2 is a big problem, and it remains. And it's not just a game problem, but to avoid sounding like a broken record, Team Ninja really needs to stop doing this and market their female protagonists with substance and more than just a pretty skin. So what makes Ninja Gaiden one of the absolute best games of all time? Well, absolutely everything else. It is the fastest paced hack and slash ever. It boasts the best controls in a video game ever. You have more weapons, combo diversity, and flexibility than any game ever. The fights and boss encounters are all unique from one another, incredibly high adrenaline pace, and all require study and practice to overcome. The game is accompanied by good music, is incredibly difficult to learn, even harder to master, but the difficulty isn't masked in hit delays or stun durations. Once you do master it, you feel like you have ninja reflexes yourself. But above all, Ninja Gaiden did one particular thing better than absolute any game ever. And that is the difficulty scaling. Now you could argue that Star Fox did this too, but they didn't do it to the level that Ninja Gaiden did. And Halo, as great as that game is guilty of cheesing its player base with its difficulty. The Halo game on Easy or on Legendary is the exact same. The changes are simple. Enemies have more health, a lot of it. Enemies do more damage, a lot of it. Besides that, the game is actually exactly the same. And that's being lazy on developer side, just make you do more of the same and penalize you more for mistakes. But this is not a fun or engaging way to scale difficulty. In fact, the only people that go through the hardest settings on games like this are diehards that do it for bragging rights. Ninja Gaiden is not one of those games. They went the extra mile and then some. Every iteration of difficulty introduces new enemies, new skill sets, new moves, less vulnerabilities, higher speeds, new anatomy, way better AI. Where you encounter a brown ninja on normal, it's now a white ninja on hard, a spider ninja on very hard, a fire ninja on master difficulty. In some cases, entire bosses would be replaced, like the cave dweller during the first stage of Greater Feed Marbus replaced with Nietzsche on master ninja. The developers do not nerf Ryu's damage. They do not boost the enemy's damage. They do give Ryu less health expansions, but your damage, your attack effectiveness, your overall kit remains the same, and that's difficulty scaling done right. Ninja Gaiden Black on Master Ninja is easily the hardest game I have ever played, but I enjoyed every second of it. It was nice to see that Nintendo, with Star Fox, did the difficulty scaling properly as well, but the overall experience of Ninja Gaiden with its combat system, which is absolute perfection, this game could easily get the crown, if not for the next contender. Before I name the absolute GOAT, let's talk about some honorable mentions that are worthy to the title of masterpiece. God of War, Doom, and Mortal Kombat. God of War is an immersive game that has a solid story, but the battle system feels very sluggish, especially for a hack and slash. The cutscenes are aggressive, tons of fun, in the same fashion Doom was. In fact, these three games were super fun. The beatdowns, glory kills, finishing moves were extremely satisfying and overwhelmingly entertaining. God of War, Doom, and Mortal Kombat are all examples of great games that deserve their spot in the Hall of Fame, but merit a lot of their fame to the shocking, humorous, and over-the-top violence. They're kind of the Quentin Tarantino of video games. Batman the Arkham series. These games are great as well, but do have two sins. One of them is that it's not an original works. Batman is a comic book character from DC, which a number of studios borrowed the IP to develop, but more importantly, the controls are just way too wonky. The free-flow combat system is unique, but other developers have come up with way better combat systems, like Ninja Gaiden for an example. Tomb Raider, incredibly successful, but really banked on the lead protagonist's appeal. Square Enix heavily toned down the game's dependency on how skimpy Lara was dressed, and instead turned their attention to creating an engaging story and a more badass lead character. The game has improved on all fronts since Square Enix took the lead, but the early exploitation of Lara's appeal as a sex symbol still leaves a bitter taste. Assassin's Creed could easily have been on this list if they would have fixed the controls. Seriously, you could be chasing down a thief and randomly start free running on some brick that throws the gamer completely off course, resulting in failure of your mission. The sensitive building blocks of this game also cause massive glitches at times, including lines that enemies can't cross, break your combos, and make you have to do way too much work to get your character under control. This is one of the greatest games of all times, with one of the worst controller schemes ever. Diablo 2 and other Blizzard games. Few companies can boast to have more impact on the gaming industry than Blizzard, but to argue that D2 deserves the crown for having been around for so long would be like arguing McDonald's is the greatest restaurant of all time. Clearly, there is a difference between financial success and what makes something great or exceptional. So, what makes Diablo 2 great? Well, the answer is simple. The community. Diablo 2 and most Blizzard games boast a plethora of gamers and developers that enhance the experience by building websites like JSP and Tradery to facilitate trading, to streamers like Heidi Plays Diablo and J3. It's the community of Blizzard games that run streams, host custom events, organize PvP brawls, and propel the player base forward. If you remove the community from Blizzard games, what are you left with? This? And more of this. And in a game like Overwatch, you're literally left with nothing, as the company has failed to deliver any real PvE content. No game that relies entirely on its community to experience the game could ever be considered for the crown. They are, in their favor, the most competitive games ever made. And yes, they basically own esports. At this point, you might as well call esports the Blizzard games, but that doesn't make the game itself great. No, the greatest game ever made. Number 1, Final Fantasy VII Remake. This game made no mistakes, no real ones anyway. The game is flawless in its storytelling, it's rich in characters, it combines subtle storytelling with cutscenes and cinematics so good they rival the cinema industry.
You okay? Grab on!
That was close.
Bring it on!
The combat system is fluent, easy to learn, not too hard to master, it's very rewarding, and scales fairly in difficulty. The characters are lovable, relatable, scary, evil, cruel, adorable. The voice acting is the best ever in a video game.
When they're faced with certain death, jackass.
Sporting a solid cast of A-listers from AFTRA and SAG-related unions. The graphics, details on clothing, lighting, skin textures, sweat, weapons, particle effects, there really isn't a thing this game did not do exceptionally. You will find yourself wishing you could play on a cinema-sized screen. Square Enix did go to extreme lengths to honor their Final Fantasy VII lineage, assigning developers to a single encounter in the game, ensuring every single fight gets the attention it deserves and provides you with a unique experience. The fights are accompanied by epic scores, the encounters shift, they change multiple times, having several stages bridged together by cutscenes so exhilarating you'll wish you had extra hands to eat popcorn. Some of the ending fights are so good in fact, you'll find yourself spontaneously jumping out of your seat to cheer at your screen as your party puts the final beat down on that villain that you just beat. Even the word exhilarating does not do this game justice. It's better than that. So, did they make any mistakes? Well, they did make one, but it's kind of up for debate, and it's not a mistake exclusive to Final Fantasy, it's kind of everywhere. If you truly care about character continuity and authenticity, then you could argue they dropped the ball a little bit on Tifa. Originally, Tifa's polygon mesh was designed when games were still in its infant stage. It's no surprise that Tifa's original outfit was over the top and not really okay. When modernizing Tifa, developers were faced with a real challenge to live true to the classic while modernizing Tifa. I wish Square Enix would have done for Tifa what they did for Lara Croft. Tifa is not insecure. She is modest to a fault, but in truth, Tifa is a confident, strong, in great shape, gorgeous individual that doesn't back down from a fight and has the balls to stand up for what she believes is right.
You've seen how much ass I can kick?
Let's face it, Tifa is a badass. Now add Cloud and Aerith to the mix and it becomes clear that Tifa likes Cloud a lot. Fast forward to Corneo's scene, Tifa clearly knows she's got the goods to pass the audition. The corny Dawn, a narcissistic and chauvinistic pig, clearly disgusts all our protagonists. So when Tifa goes from this,
or I'll smash 'em,
to this,
the pillar?
Yeah, no. An individual that strong, that confident, and that able to pressure her opponent would never assert herself in such a vulnerable and weak way. This was a mistake in the script. It was also the game's only mistake, and it's a tiny one. Contrary to this moment, Tifa's persona in the rest of the game is flawless. Take this exchange for an example. In the sewers, though I admit the surroundings are a bit of an unrealistic place for such a jest, in this moment, Tifa could knowingly be taking this provocative pose. But in this installment, Cloud, the individual whose affection she craves, is the only male individual in this area. So here, it makes sense that Tifa might want to take a little advantage of her position opposite him, flirt a little bit, and mess with him. There have been some truly great RPGs in the past, and that's no surprise, considering our most powerful tool in entertainment is ultimately the power of a good story. Our films, our music, our literature, and now our video games, it is clear that a solid story is the most crucial component to any game, regardless of genre. Chrono Trigger, Secret of Mana, Suikoden, Legend of the Dragoon, Phantasy Star, Fable, The Legend of Zelda, the Final Fantasy series, all of them are masterpieces one by one in their own right. None of them did it quite as good as Final Fantasy VII Remake. This game is the avatar of video games, and Square Enix is James Cameron. If you disagree, you are free to let me know in the comments, and who knows, maybe I'll revise the list and make another video. Thank you all for watching. See you next time.